Hi everyone, I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I'm sure everybody saw Barack Obama's press conference where he claimed he's not for bigger government. Well, what's important to do is to look at the objective budget, to look at the numbers, to look at the facts.
Well, that sounds fair to me. Does that sound fair to everyone else? Yeah? All right, well, let's go on.
That's the only way to analyze whether or not Barack Obama's first 100 days is good or bad for the country. So this is a chart right here of the budget deficit. It starts with the year 1980, it goes to the year 2009. If you look in 1980, the budget deficit never got above $500 billion. For each year, we did run a deficit, so the debt was increasing, but it never got close to $500 billion. When the Republicans took control of the House and Bill Clinton was president, we did eventually reach a surplus by the year 2000, which was never higher than $300 billion. George Bush and the Republicans took office, spending got out of control, and we did run a budget deficit each year, which also increased the national debt.
Well, so far you're doing an okay job. Let's see where you go from here.
Now, if you notice, that also never got higher than $500 billion. The Democrats then took control in 2006 of Congress, and by 2008 we ran another budget deficit, again, that never got higher than $500 billion. Barack Obama takes office, and in January he claims that he inherited a $1.2 trillion budget deficit.
Claims? Are you suggesting he didn't inherit the $1.2 trillion deficit? You want me to do the math for you? In 2008, when President Bush submitted the 2009 budget, he estimated total tax revenues for that year would be about $2.7 trillion, and that his spending budget would be about $3.1 trillion. However, by the time Obama took office, total tax revenues were not as high as Bush had originally estimated, and so, not including his $700 billion bailout, we were already $500 billion in the hole before Obama even took office. Add to that Bush's bailout, and there you have your $1.2 trillion deficit, which Obama inherited.
Well, the fact of the matter is that you have to remember that Barack Obama was in the Senate when the Democrats were in control, and he voted and ran on increased government spending. So when he says he inherited it, in effect, he voted himself that budget increase.
Yeah, and so did John McCain, as well as two-thirds of all the other Senate Republicans. It was Bush's bailout. Why can't you just accept that? He was the president. He had veto power. Even if Obama voted no, the bill would have still passed. The only person who could have stopped that bill was George Bush. Even if Obama voted no, the bill would have still passed. Obama was not responsible for it. Bush was. Accept it.
However, what people have to remember is in his first 100 days in office, Barack Obama created a deficit. He voted for a stimulus package that was larger than any of the budget deficits that any year Bush was president. That's really important to recognize because Barack Obama did not inherit this deficit. He created it along with the Democrats. Now, if we look long term, here's another chart from the Washington Post and the Heritage Foundation from the CBO estimate and the White House estimate.
Oh no, here we go again. Get ready for an avalanche of bullshit. Didn't he just say we were only going to be looking at the facts, and now he's comparing projections with actual numbers?
Here's the year 2000 with the Bill Clinton and Republican House. We had a $236 billion surplus. George Bush comes into office and the Republicans take control. We did run a deficit, but nothing greater. Well, until 2008, nothing was greater than $400 billion. We did get out of control with our spending. Eventually, Democrats get elected in 2006, take control of Congress, and by 2008, we are running a deficit again with the bailouts and the stimulus packages over the summer.
Didn't he already go over all of this?
Now, here's when Barack Obama takes office, and here's what he's proposing. Now, in 2009, he inherited what he claims he inherited, even though he voted for it, a $1.2 trillion budget deficit. He then increased it. He voted for increased government spending, and now he's claiming that he's going to cut the budget deficit in half. Well, what does he mean by cutting the budget deficit in half? He's not talking about cutting the budget deficit in half from any of the Bush years. He's talking about cutting a budget deficit in half from one that he created. This part here, Barack Obama and the Democrats are completely responsible for. They voted for it. Not one Republican voted for this. In fact, 16 Democrats voted against this increased spending. No one seems to talk about that. You have 16 Democrats voting against it.
16 Democrats voted against it? Really? And not one Republican voted for it? Let's check that out for a moment. Well, it looks like only 11 Democrats voted against it in the House. But maybe you meant 16 total in the House and in the Senate. Let's check out how many Democrats in the Senate voted against it. No Democrats voted against it in the Senate. But this is interesting. It looks like 2 Republicans voted for it. But didn't you just say not one Republican voted for it?
Now, when Barack Obama said he's going to cut spending in half, well, he's really just cutting it in half to this amount and to this amount. But this is still greater than every one of the Bush deficits. So when everyone says, well, where were you the last 8 years? Well, we were complaining about this deficit created by the Republicans and Bush, but it was nothing even close to what is being proposed by the Democrats right now. That's very important to recognize. Even the lowest in 2013 estimates, that doesn't come close to the Bush deficit that didn't reach it was only slightly higher than $400 billion.
Once again, those are just projections. If you want an idea of how unreliable those long-term budget projections are, take a look at the 1993 long-term budget projection when Clinton entered office. He was projected to run deficits every year he was in office. Instead, he produced surpluses. But maybe he was just lucky. Let's look at long-term projections for 2001 when Bush entered office. It looks like he was supposed to produce surpluses every year he was in office. And it actually looks like he was predicted to erase the national debt. Refresh my memory again, because I'm a little foggy on this. How did that turn out for him? To give a better idea of how much uncertainty there is in the budget projections, I thought the following excerpt from the 2005 Budget and Economic Outlook report would explain it best. Actual budgetary outcomes are almost certain to differ from CBO's baseline projections, both because of future legislative actions and because of unanticipated changes in economic and security-related conditions and in other factors that affect federal programs and sources of revenues. It goes on to say, in addition to the impact of future legislative actions, the federal budget is sensitive to economic and technical factors that are difficult to forecast. In creating its baseline, CBO must make assumptions about such economic elements as interest rates, inflation, and the growth of GDP. Discrepancies between those assumptions and actual economic conditions can have a significant effect on the extent to which budgetary outcomes differ from baseline projections. For instance, the baseline reflects an assumption that the real inflation-adjusted rate of growth of GDP will slowly fall from 3.6% in calendar year 2006 to 2.5% in 2016. If the actual rate was 0.1% higher or lower each year, the cumulative deficit for the 2007-2016 period would differ from CBO's projections by about $270 billion. Throughout the remainder of his video, How the World Works continues using the budget projections, which were based for the most part on Bush's policies, to convince you that Obama is doing a horrible job as president. I could go on pointing out how flawed his entire argument is, but is it really necessary?